All right, welcome back to the Wedding Catch Co podcast.
Hello.
I think it's mid-August by the time this goes out, so we're very much in the weeds of the season. So I hope everyone out there is having a good year. I hope we're all, not feeling too much the burnout and the stress. And I think it's inevitable in this industry that you're going to feel some sort of tiredness at this point. But yeah, I hope things are going well for you. Like mid-season is always that time where you kind of need these things to listen to and hear how other people are doing and things like that. So, and I feel this is a really, really sort of apt episode for that as well. Again, visual listeners will see that we're sat next to each other, which means we've got a guest.
It's the tell now, isn't it?
Board today.
If me and Chris are sat next to each other rather than facing each other, you know that we're not alone.
Yeah. But people who listen, like just on Spotify, won't know. But it's just like if you open YouTube and see us sat next to each other, it's like, yep, that's a guest episode. That's a guest episode. But today we've got another national winner of TWIA, another videographer as well, and that is Mike from Mac Videography. Say hello.
Hi guys, how are we doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yes, all good. No, really appreciate you coming on. I mean, I've followed your work for a while now, and obviously we've chatted over Instagram and WhatsApp and things like that. So it's nice to like finally sort of have a real chat really, and just have a bit of time just to talk things through and just like discuss what's on our minds. And but yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to just first because I think it's best if you sort of pick yourself up and introduce yourself. Just tell us who you are, what you do, how long you've been doing it for, and what your sort of style is.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I'm Mike, Mac Videography. Been doing this for, how long have I been doing this now? 6-7 years. Videography has always been sort of like in kind of my blood really. But before all of this, I was a marketing manager for a medical company. But also before all of that, I was a bit of a jack of all trades really, getting involved with in radio, and also used to be a nightclub DJ as well. So yeah, just trying out a lot of different things, but generally speaking, all very creative stuff. So and it's kind of led me to where I'm at right now. So so yeah, like I said, filming weddings for the last 6 or 7 years now. I think I'm in my 7th season, and I think it's going really well.
Well, it obviously is, because you won a national award.
To win the national, you done. So when did you win that? That was 2023. Yeah. You won the TWIA national. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, so it was January of 23. So I would have won the regional in November 22. That was the Southeast, and then won TWIA in London in January. So yeah.
It's obviously going really well.
So you can't say it's not going well. To win the national off of your essentially 5th year of business, you had a pretty steady ascent, I'd say.
Gonna be honest, it was quite a surreal moment. I haven't felt like when they called out my name, like obviously going up to win the regional was okay. Yeah, I mean I was drunk, so okay, whatever happened. And then we went to the national. I was like, well, this is like a whole different league, because like I'm in a room full of everybody who's obviously at the top of their game, and obviously how TWIA is done. It's not a lot of it's obviously client voted, but it's obviously voted for by your peers in the industry. So you've got, especially in the videography category, you've got the Lawsons. And a few others as well that are very well known, and they're all kind of looking at your work, and it's like, well, that's your winner. It's like, oh wow, that's me.
That's it. We do our work in isolation, don't we? And the only people that see it are our couples or the people liking it on Instagram, and then not necessarily and having judges look at your stuff and give you that sort of affirmation that you need, I guess, like that other people like your stuff as well, and that you're not just doing your own thing and doing it differently to everyone else, but you're also appealing to a lot of people as well, I guess. But like I've followed your work since I remember something popped up on Instagram a long time ago. I can't remember when I followed you, but it must have been a while ago now, and I instantly knew I had to like follow you and loved your work for a long time. And I think it's very unique, and that it has that again, I'll let you describe it yourself, but I feel like it has that sort of dramatic, epic kind of element to it. But also you're putting you know, little moments in there as well. And like, I noticed a couple that I've watched where you've had the groom mucked up and he said something like before the ceremony, and you've put that in, or little things like that. And I really like how you kind of mix the two sort of natural styles and the like really dramatic epic stuff together as well. How would you describe like the sort of work that you do?
Yeah, I think I get asked this a lot. You know, what is your style? And I think if I was to kind of summarize in just kind of one word, undefined, I think is probably the best way to describe it, because every couple has their kind of different path in life. You know, they can be very, very connected, be fun, be kind of out there, or you can have that kind of more introverted couple where they are kind of, you know, don't like the whole PDA type thing, and you know, you just kind of go to a wedding and or you do the kind of pre-consultations before you get to know what they're all about, and this is the whole kind of process. I mean, we all do this as photographers and videographers. We always get to know our couples before we actually go, and before we book them first, to see if we are the kind of the right fit, and obviously, you know, secondly is to kind of just to try and match their expectations. You know, a lot of people book me based on my storytelling. I would say that my work is not always 100% polished, because let's face it, you know, there are kind of moments of the day, like what you just picked up on, Chris. You know, there will be something that a groom might just say just beforehand, and it could be something funny or something really, really kind of, you know, emotional, and it's kind of like, well, I feel like that just kind of needs to be in there. And it would be remiss of us as creators to kind of then not kind of put that in. So yeah, I mean, my kind of work goes from kind of one end of the spectrum to the other. Again, a lot of it is inspired by the couples themselves, you know, kind of what they give me all day, because I'm sure you've had this as well, right? They can say, they can tell you one thing on the consultation calls and stuff like that. So yeah, we're kind of, you know, a bit shy in front of the camera and this and that and the other. And I'll be like, well, let's just see what happens on the day, because alcohol is a wonderful thing. And before you know it, you'll be picking her up or picking him up, and you'll be swinging each other around. And, you know, before you know it, you won't even give a toss that there are cameras about. And we love that. And I think it's just kind of being real with couples, and just kind of like, you kind of, even on a day, you know where your boundaries are. And I think you touched on this on your last episode, I think, about sort of like, in terms of direction and stuff like that, I believe. You definitely do know, because for me, it is also just staying true to what I do, and that's capturing everything in its natural element, rather than being forceful in terms of direction and stuff like that. It's not a Hollywood film set, it's a wedding day. Yeah, it's just going with the flow.
I think we share a lot of values in that way as well. Like, you know, like you say, like we discussed it in our episode last time, but about capturing things authentically, and also about having a style without feeling the need to apply that style to everybody's weddings and making them all the same.
Yeah.
And we get a lot, because we, like as you say, do consultation calls or calls before we book the couple, and we literally say what made you stop at our work. And a lot of the time it will come up that, you know, we've watched a few different videos of yours, and you can see they're all kind of cohesive, but every video has a little bit of a different element to it, and it feels different. Like, you watch a church wedding with 30 family members, and then off to like a local house or something, it's going to be completely different to a massive 150 person like party wedding. And if you have a style, yes, you can apply that style to the different kinds of weddings and types of couples, but if you're trying to fit them into your template, you're never going to really capture the story of the couple themselves.
Yeah, and I think, like you said as well, you said, you know, at the beginning of that maybe you feel that your films can lack like polish, and I think some of that kind of, like you say, that kind of real kind of polished, kind of stylized aesthetic only comes when you're looking at making a similar type of film. Like, when you are dealing with different people that have different wants and needs and got different levels of confidence in front of the camera, when you are listening to a couple and making a client-led, experience of their day, I think it has to have that element of realism in it, which inevitably is going to kind of take the edge off of that polish. Not that you cannot still make a really professional, high quality looking photo or film, but like you say, it's not Hollywood. You're not writing a script of their day. You're being led by what's happening. And so I think there's always going to be that playoff. But, you know, from the last episode that we did, and obviously from watching your films, I would take that level of realism and humility over polish any day.
I think, polish is, there are times where that you, like you say, when you find the moment in a day and you feel like you have to maybe, well, you not have to, but you feel like you really want to put that in the film because it best describes the couple, but maybe it doesn't conform to like what is pretty or anything like that. Like my latest highlights film literally has, I think there was a moment where the bride's walking down the aisle and the groom says, "Oh, you got me." Like, because he's like tearing, and then she goes, "Yeah," and I wanted to put that in, but the band that are playing as they walk down the aisle was so loud that I couldn't really isolate his voice enough, but I did it anyway, and it sounds a bit wonky with like the band suddenly coming in and then her walking down the aisle, but it just had to go in because that moment between them where he goes, "You got me," and she cheers as she's walking down the aisle, which needed to go in.
Yeah, and it is those kind of little moments that I think couples will appreciate 100%. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, there are a variety of styles in this game, and, you know, and we all kind of serve our clients' needs differently and everything like that. But for me, personally, and, you know, to be creatively different is... and not kind of consistent to one style, it just keeps everything kind of interesting for me as a creator. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, we touched on you know, how polished things can be. You know, I filmed at a wedding at Goodwood House not so long back.
Oh, that's not too far from us. Yeah, that's much more in our neck of the woods than yours. Yeah.
It was you know, and that, you guys know this. I mean, if you've been there before, beautiful venue. You know, and it was a high net worth client. Everything that you could throw at it, they did, you know, everything luxury they did. But there was just this one moment that kind of threw the whole kind of direction of travel, where when they'll put the trailer out, how it's constructed. And there was basically the father of the bride got so pissed. Am I allowed?
Yeah, you can swear. You're good. Yeah. Chris can stick an E on the episode.
Got so drunk. It got so drunk that he basically was very. His dance moves were quite out there, to the point where he lost his footing doing the father-daughter dance, and basically he fell down, brought his bride down with her.
I don't think I've seen this one, but
I feel like I need to.
Yeah.
It's on the grid. It's on the grid. And what was funny is that, okay, so that was a point that happened, and then obviously then you just have to kind of judge it whether that goes in the film. So right, so she got back up, she didn't look embarrassed, she brushed it off, had a laugh, everybody laughed, and carried on, and it was great. And you know what? I'm not going to not put that moment in just to make it polished on my part. You know, that happened, and that's how it was. But what was funny about it is that about an hour prior to that happening, the speeches were happening, and he actually made a reference about him getting so drunk and doing his dad dancing. And then when it came together in the edit, I mean, you have to see it to kind of to understand it a little bit more. But it was kind of then, that's how I constructed the trailer. There was kind of obviously other elements of the day with that, but that was kind of like one of the key moments, part of that. So yeah. Otherwise, it would have been quite a polished kind of end product. But then that happened. Yeah. It's like, oh, great. But yeah, but they loved it.
Yeah, I imagine they did. Yeah, I listened to a podcast episode once and one thing they said to me really stuck with me is that, I mean, weddings are weddings, right? But there's usually something in that day that like can turn a film from one thing into another thing, and I feel like finding that one thing, this is going to be really difficult for me to explain now because it all worked in my head, but just finding that one thing and honing into that, and either starting the film with it, ending the film with it, or whether it's a whole mood or a particular part of a speech which maybe you've never heard before, or there's, you know, weddings generally follow a similar structure, but it's having the you know, the foresight to think, okay, this unique thing happened at this wedding. So I reckon the edit can sort of have a little bit of a revolve around this a little bit, or this can be like quite a big part of it. And that's what separates each film from another, is that you've picked out something from the day that's unique to the
And it
thing.
is that, I think, like, you know, if you kind of spoke about a wedding day as a business, is that, you know, they do run kind of quite formulaically in a variety of styles and budgets, but you are almost looking for that USP, aren't you, of that wedding, or that one thing that separates it. And, you know, as kind of a visual from someone that wasn't at the wedding, you would watch that and go, oh, the bride's dad fell over, and you're not expecting it, so that kind of makes the film, doesn't it? But then you also know that the guests that came home from that wedding, you know, and the person that was looking after their children will go, oh, how was your day? The first thing they're going to say to that couple is, it was amazing. The bride's dad got so drunk that he fell over during the dance, and that's the thing that they tell everybody.
100%.
And so it's like, you can't not put that in the film. You can't hide something which was the talking point of the day.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess, like, there are so many dynamics to a wedding day. You know, you have all that build up of anticipation in the morning, then obviously you have the ceremony bit, and then there's obviously the bits in between, and then obviously the party bit. And obviously I try and incorporate all of those kind of different moods into what I do. I'm not really a fan of too much of the whole kind of the dreary music and you know, the too classical, like really like low tone kind of film. It works in certain situations, but not a massive fan of that, because, you know, it's when I want to depict people dancing and having fun in the evening part, right, the last thing I want to do is kind of then, you know, slow it being slow motion and then put all this piano music in the background. It just does not work for me.
I get so confused when I watch these films, and like, oh, and like you said, again, it's a style and everyone does their own thing, right? But when you have that classical piano music in there and you think, oh, we're getting up to the dancing, and it just carries on, and it's like just a violin playing and everyone's absolutely raving in slow motion to a violin, like, or something really slow, and it's like you want the peaks and troughs, if that's the word, don't you? Of like, you want the higher moments, and then you want to bring it down, and you have a similar kind
the way I kind of describe it to my couples is that kind of my work, it takes you on a bit of a roller coaster. You guys almost just picked up your drinks up in sync then. That was kind of cool. But yeah, no, we kind of we take our couples on a bit of a roller coaster, really, and that's all I really say. You know, to all my couples. Other than that, you know, I turn up to a wedding as a blank. It's complete blank canvas. Because really, you don't know what you're going to shoot. They can tell you everything on the day. I mean, I had a bride just recently that I just filmed for. She, bless her, she suffered from a brain hemorrhage when she was younger, and she suffers from chronic fatigue. She did warn me about that before, said she might be a bit moody on the day. It's a high potential of her being moody, but do you know what? I wouldn't have known any different on the day. So it's kind of like things like that, really. It's like, you know, you just don't know really what you're going to film.
You don't, even though you have these calls and you speak to the couples, like you say, alcohol can make a huge difference, but also that them being around their friends and family and being a bit more comfortable than when they're at home chatting to a stranger over a video call. There's been a couple of occasions this year where I spoke to a couple and I've come off the call and gone, yeah, they're a bit quiet. I feel like it's going to be kind of low key, and you know, it's going to be great. They're lovely, but they're just not going to bring the energy or want necessarily some of the more upbeat stuff. And then you go to the date, and they're like doing shots by the bar, and they're, you know, with their friends, they're dancing and singing and things, and you kind of like, this is not the couple I saw. Yeah. But then they're in this. It's
crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. It's a bit like when you get a text message from somebody and you read it in a completely different way when it's completely it went in a different way. It's kind of like that kind of same way. Is, you know, you have your consultation and you kind of try to build up a mental picture, but it's not actually to the actual wedding day that it will happen.
So, like you said, with like that bride you just filmed for, I think I I wouldn't want to go to a wedding not knowing my couple and feeling underprepared. But sometimes I think that you can know too much. So do you know what I mean? In that instance, you can kind of go in and you have kind of a picture built on the conversations that you've had. Where if she hadn't have told you that, you wouldn't have known. And I think sometimes you almost... That's the nice thing, is that you know your couple, but you don't know the guests, or you don't know kind of the family story. And so that bit you kind of do have to really just take it at face value and see how it plays out in front of you and then feed off of that. So I think it's, like I say, it's being educated enough, isn't it, that you understand the story so that you don't kind of say the wrong thing or do whatever. But at the same time, it's not knowing enough that you don't write the story before you've even got to the day.
Yeah, talk about saying the wrong thing. I actually made a bit of a faux pas. I remember this, quite an embarrassing moment. Obviously, I didn't read my notes properly beforehand. We did a whole big group shot, and me and the photographer working together. They do a group shot, and then I obviously do the group shot with a drone or whatever sometimes. And I'd be like, right, thank you very much, everybody. Right, go get drunk. And it's like, it's a non-alcoholic wedding, isn't it? So it's like...
Amazing. I've seen worse, to be fair. Like, I've seen a DJ say, "Oh, time to bring on the dad for the father of the bride dance," and the bride doesn't have a dad, and it's like, where did the DJ get this from? Like, that is really awkward. Luckily, the bride sort of laughed it off, but the room kind of went all at once.
When you get the gasp, that's when you know you're in trouble, then, isn't it?
Have you had any times, Mike? Because like, similar to you, I put little things in quirky bits in the film that I think people will like and that are a bit different. But there's been a couple of times where I put things in, like a couple of times that I can remember is when one of them, when the groom finished his letter and then all of his lads sort of gather around him and go, "Oh," and give him a hug, and like they're having a laugh and things like that. And I thought I'd put that at the end of like quite an emotional film. And another time where a groom tried to like lift up a bride and then they like stumbled and they were grabbing onto each other and laughing. And I thought, you know what, that's probably better than the lift up and spin. But both of those times, like the couple came back to me and was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not really too keen on this. Can you remove it?" And I was like, in my head, that was the moment that like brought the smile to my face for the whole film. But for them, they were like, "Yeah, get rid of it and we'll just have the classic film." Is there any times where you've had sort of, you put something in and they've gone, "No, maybe that's a bit too far away from the usual"?
I don't know, actually. Like, if I'm being honest, I've been kind of lucky. I've been really, really lucky with my couples, that I haven't had too much in the way of... If couples have ever come back to me to say there's an issue with the films, it's mainly technical, with something that I've kind of missed.
Yeah.
But other than that, there hasn't been any kind of times where couples have asked me to take anything out, really.
And I just thought it was really interesting because obviously, like, there are things that, especially like, I don't know, bride or father bride falling over or whatever, things that like some people might be a bit, you know, if they're taking themselves too seriously or whatever.
With things like that, I was very much in two minds. So coming back to that story about the one at Goodwood House, as I said, that I was in two minds about that, because obviously, yeah, it was an embarrassing moment for the bride and the dad, but obviously I kind of had to judge it as I was there. And when they got back up, they brushed it off, they carried on, and they were really, really happy, and they were carrying on. And then I showed her the clip afterwards on the monitor, and she was just laughing her heads off. And do you know what? That kind of gave me the authority to go, do you know what? Definitely. That's going in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe it's... Well, yeah, partly, like you say, it's reading the room and knowing what their reaction to it was at the time and how it affects their reaction when they watch it.
Yeah, I think it's very important that you kind of know the boundaries, definitely. With this kind of thing, and not only on the day but on the edit as well.
Yeah, I think it's knowing your couple, isn't it? Like, I've had that in instances where I've been culling, and there's maybe been a face that I've thought like a bride has pulled a or someone that I think, oh, that's hilarious. And I think in that moment you have to ask, like, but would they be laughing with me if I included this? And I think then you kind of say, you think back in your head, don't you, to how they were on the day, how they've been in your calls, and do they share my sense of humour, or would they be horrified if they saw that? Because that's the last thing I want to do is kind of upset anybody, but at the same time you don't want to hold something back if you think that it will kind of make them laugh. And so it is a call, isn't it, where I think you kind of go, well, what is the line? And that comes down to, you know, all the things that you've said about kind of not having you know, not too much of a, this is my style, this is, yeah, everybody gets the same, but kind of being very kind of couple led, it allows you to kind of have the insight to make that call, doesn't it?
Mike, just to move on a little bit with your transitions and things that you do, I want to talk about those because I like the way that you. I mean, I heard on another podcast, so we won't repeat it, about how you kind of. Again, you're not really, you're thinking about that on the day, but you're thinking about it in the edit as well. I think for me, my question is, how do you maintain that level of, you know, having to approach the edit, sit down and do the edit, and then having to think about those sort of more advanced editing techniques? So, I've seen a film of yours where you had the bride and groom had a little, you know, wedding newspaper thing, and you sort of zoomed into it, and it zoomed into another frame, and that's kind of the vibe of your little really transitions, cool. Isn't it? And they're really cool. And I tried at one point to integrate more of that stuff into my films, but I found that I was just getting the burnout of just looking at my films thinking, oh, this doesn't have this in it, or I need to include this stuff in order for it to then be cohesive across. And I was finding it took longer to then edit the films, and I was getting behind. And my films are kind of simple by default, in a way that, like, I want them to be repeatable, and I want to be able to sit down and have them, like, it's kind of a formula, but obviously you do stuff different for each person, but it's not like there's nothing spectacular happen that's going to take a lot of time per edit. So how do you do that without sort of having the burnout of getting to the end of the film and being like, oh, where's the Mac Videography transitions that people were expecting?
Yeah, no, you're not the first person to have asked how I do this. It's a really difficult question to answer, because I just think it's just kind of one of those things, you just see it and you just kind of make it work, and then it's just bringing all the other elements into the day. I just want to try and figure out an example of what I've done recently, and then I think it's probably best I explain it like that. Yeah, it's like I said, a very difficult question to answer, just because, you know, when you get back from the day, obviously, you know, wedding days are pretty full on anyway, and there are a lot of moving parts to a wedding day that you don't even think about how to do those things. It's only kind of when I get into the edit and I see, oh, right, okay, so I've got this shot, and then maybe if I've got another shot of a night time of the building, then maybe we can go from day to night, and kind of then you go to different parts of the day. Honestly, my brain is a mess sometimes when it comes to this kind of thing. There's no easy way to explain this other than just having a look at a piece of footage that comes onto the timeline and go, do you know what, that would go really, really well with this? Or like I said, I mean, sometimes I do kind of like when you kind of move the camera around, because I use the gimbal all the time. I love my smooth shots. Yeah. I'm lost without a gimbal. And there will be times where I purposely, you know, if I'm doing like a bit of like a pan-in shot, you know, I make sure that there's something then just kind of cuts across the foreground. So then perhaps maybe there may be something later that and then I can transition into, which to me, that's a simple masking job. Yeah. There are certain things that I do as well when you kind of like do the layout of the room. Here's a good example. So ceremony area. I try to make a conscious effort to do this all the time, especially in the trailers where you've got kind of the room empty, but then you come back and then film the same thing again with people in it, and then you kind of then merge it in. Yeah,
I've seen your aisle shot of like you're sort of gimbaling down the aisle, and then it transitions into the same shot, but all the guests are beside you and the groom standing at the end.
That's really cool. And that you kind of answered my question.
And they're really simple to do. It's really simple to do. It's just being mindful of doing it on the day.
Yeah, I guess you sort of train your brain, don't you?
Yeah, but then you you know what, sometimes I film stuff by accident and it goes, oh, actually, do you know what, I'm sure you're guilty of this as well. You film stuff by accident and it's like, oh, actually, that looks kind of cool, I'll use that. And and it just works. So
See, I don't think you probably, in the end, in your subconscious, you probably haven't shot it by accident. Like, there's obviously a way of thinking that you've been doing this long enough now that kind of, you know that you've developed this style of editing, that there's some sort of something in your brain that's telling you to kind of that you will need this. And that was, whilst I didn't want to interrupt your flow while you were trying to explain it, but that was kind of my question is, are you actively shooting for the edit, or on the day are you instinctively shooting and then seeing what comes together, or you're building these transitions with what you've shot pretty much at the desk rather than actively shooting for the transition?
No, I'm literally, like I say, when I say the wedding is a blank canvas, I really do mean that. I really don't know what I'm going to be shooting on the day. I don't shoot for the edit at all. It is literally, I will go there, see what's kind of presented in front of me, and just kind of do it on the fly, really.
I think that's good. I think it leaves you a lot more open, doesn't it, to seeing moments. Like, I remember working, and it was a good few years ago now, working with a pair of videographers, and they even had like a piece of paper and they was chatting to each other before certain things and saying, one saying to the other, well, when you finished filming that moment, make sure that you do whip out kind of above, so that when and they'd already almost pieced together the film, so they knew which way that they wanted to pan out of something, so that would then follow into the transition, and more as they'd storyboarded the film before they'd even shot it. And that just seemed like a level of planning
sometimes
that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that level of organisation does happen in the bigger weddings, when I have second shooters and stuff like that. But when I am flying solo, it is, and if I know that the day, obviously I know all the information beforehand, what's going on, etc., etc., and I know then how to, what was I saying? Then on the day itself, it will just be kind of, just filming on the fly rather than just thinking about things, because you can get into real danger of kind of overthinking about stuff, and you get into, I remember when I first started out doing all of this, and I'd be like so worried that I didn't get the makeup shot or this and that and the other. But I'm a little bit like, doing this for 7 years now, I was kind of a bit like, I'm a lot more relaxed, and I just kind of feel like, well, if I don't get the makeup shot, is the bride and groom really gonna care?
Yeah, I've started feeling a bit more like that as well. Just a bit more like, does it really matter? Like, does this shot really matter? Like, we've taught
as long as I've
ourselves
got
over years
enough to kind of set the scene of how it was on the morning, all the establishing shots around it, etc. Then it is very much kind of, It's, for me, it is with my films. They're very, I use a lot of audio, as you've probably seen. I take a lot of different audio sources from different speakers. It's not always typically the bride and groom that I take audio snippets from. Basically, I will go to edit the ceremony, go to edit the speeches, and when I'm editing those first, so as part of my editing workflow, I'll always edit the ceremony and speeches first, just to kind of build up a story, and then I'll take away snippets of how I'm going to build that story. And then that's how then I form what you see on the Instagram and stuff like that.
So me and you have spoken before about primes and zooms, just to get a little bit techie. And at the beginning of this year, you were sort of debating what you're going to go with, and like we're switching between and things like that. I've said on this podcast before, my setup that I've kind of stuck with now is my 35 and 55 just together, mainly handheld, but every now and then on the gimbal. Have you got something like your go-to that you shoot with?
So at the beginning of last year, I moved on to cine lenses. I came away from the zoom lens.
Is it the Samyang VAF ones?
That's the Samyang VAF set that I've got. So I've got a 24, 35 and a 75. And then obviously I've got a B and C cam, which I still use zoom lenses throughout the day. So if I was to give you sort of like my setup of the day, I obviously use the Ronin gimbal, where I run on Sony FX3, the Samyang lenses I've just mentioned, and the audio sources, the Rode wireless go-to mics, and I use the Sony pen things, TX650s, which most of us use nowadays. And I use, like I said, I use the gimbal all day. pretty much. I tend to go on my B cam and then chuck it on an 85 to get some candid shots for about 15 minutes after ceremony, when they're all mingling, having a drink and stuff like that. I put my gimbal down, get on the 85 and just capture a few people laughing and mingling that. And then the only time I kind of move away from that is then I put my camera on a zoom lens for the first dance. Okay. Because I like to get, with just one camera, I can make it look like there's two camera angles if I'm constantly going in and out. Now, I will know beforehand if the couple are either doing a choreographed sequence where they want me to film it in full, but I always say to the couple, I said, there's no need for me to film your first dance, which for most of us is awkward anyway. So there's no way I'm going to film 3.5 minutes of you standing in the middle of the room with everybody looking at you doing little semicircles. So what I always ask the question on my questionnaires, like, are you going to do a choreographed routine, or is it going to be the awkward shuffle in the middle? And 9 times out of 10, it's always the shuffle in the middle. And okay, I'll stick a zoom lens on, because you never know. By this point, they might be a little bit tipsy. They might get a little bit adventurous with their dancing. Might be a few spins, and that's where the zoom lens really does come really handy for me. So then I can get that wide if there is that kind of impromptu kind of spin going on, and I can get really, really tight if I wanted to.
I agree. I've kind of like, having said that I stick to 35 and 50, I find that for the first dance, sometimes you're in a smaller room and they'll do like an impromptu spin and I'm on a 35 and I'm like, oh, well, that would have been nice if it was a little bit wider. But I'm also a bit of a bokeh lover, so I don't really shoot below anything. 1.8 is probably as far as I'll go. 1.8 or 1.4, anything else is...
I was a bit like this, because I know we had this conversation, and like I said, I've come away from the zoom lens because aesthetically it's not been as pleasing as it once was when I first started out. It was great when it first started out. It covered all the focal ranges that I wanted on one lens. Didn't need to mess around with switching the lenses and that. But then I saw Samyang bought the VAFs out, and they are amazing. They are so lightweight. They're so lightweight. And they're great for the gimbal, and all 3 focal lengths all weigh the same. So for me, rebalancing the gimbal, there's no need to do that. So ever since the beginning of last year, that's the setup I had. And yeah, if we was to ever work together, you'll see I'll be constantly changing lenses, like for everything that I do, always constantly changing lenses, but I get what I need. And I kind of know instinctively where I need to go with things. So, when there is the couple portrait session, I'll always want to get that kind of wide walking shot. And then when they are coloured in close, I'm always putting on the 75 onto the gimbal, getting really, really close up. Well, not too close, but really getting those kind of detail shots. Because I am a big fan of getting the tighter shots as well. So that gives you a little flavour of kind of how I work on the day anyway.
Amazing. Cool. So before the photographers tune out, then, as we're going very deep into the video, shall we get onto our main topic, which is sort of like mental health and keeping yourself, I guess, sane during the wedding season and while we do this job. And I think it's not spoken about nearly enough in our industry, and especially as we're all isolated in our own bubbles. And I mean, everything's become a little bit more connected now with groups and podcasts and Facebook groups, things like that, and meetups and things like that. But there was a time where it wasn't that way, and you're literally just on your own. You're like, is everyone else going through this, or is it just me that's like really exhausted and stressed right now? So yeah, I was happy that when you came and said that you wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, I think I think it's something which maybe post-COVID, I think a lot of us have become a lot more honest, or felt that it's a lot more acceptable to kind of voice in public that, on your socials or whatever, that you are going through this, or it's busy, or you're burnt out or whatever. But I still think it's something which hopefully a lot of people out there, or if you're starting in the industry, kind of feel that you can't say that in an open forum. So to have, the platform that we have with the podcast, and someone like yourself, Mike, that's willing to come along and talk about that, I think it hopefully will help or be reassuring for a lot of people that they're not alone.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I've been doing this for a while now, and and I'm sure we've all been on our own little journeys as well. And starting a business from scratch is not the easiest thing in the world. It really isn't. I've always been used to having that job security, that of being employed and all of that, and then kind of then migrate. The silver lining of COVID provided that, the kind of knowing that I've got a full diary, because it pushed all the postponements into the following year, and knowing that you're going to be really, really busy, and that was a great time to obviously move out of my full-time job. Albeit way too busy.
Equally, 2021 was dangerously busy, wasn't it? And I remember turning up to weddings in August 2021, and like literally makeup artists, hairstylists, everyone there was just like, oh my God, like this is one of the worst years we've had in terms of how busy we are and how stressed we are, sort of thing. And I get that being busy is good, but when you turn up to that many weddings and every wedding part there is like exhausted, you start to realise the effects that COVID did have.
Do you think I have some weddings, probably from end of the summer, early autumn in 2021, that I probably don't have a memory of? And before that, I've been really good that I would know all my couples' names, I'd know the venues, and I kind of prided myself on having a really good kind of memory and grasp of my couples. But I think going through that year and doing as many as I did, there are weddings now that I've looked back on and actually have very little memory of. And I think I was probably just that exhausted that I was just turning up and making good work. I managed to make it through that time without, kind of delivering weddings still within kind of, the time that I promised I would, and of the quality that I would, but in kind of, it actually kind of leaving a mark on you, or kind of you really being present in those days. I think there are definitely ones that I look back on now, and without looking at the photos, that's much more of a trigger than it probably needed or should be at other times,
Yeah. No, it's COVID was a very testing time for all of us. I know kind of COVID's been and gone now, and say been and gone. It's still lurking around, obviously, but it's the COVID era, shall I say, of all of that experience has kind of gone. And I think the wedding industry has kind of normalised now, and we're back into kind of normal numbers every year. And I think we've got to a point, obviously post-COVID, that everybody's kind of gone through that pain and stress and kind of vowed to themselves, no more.
Exactly.
Well, and I get it now. When I first started out this business, and even my old boss even told me this before I left my full-time job, he said, just don't take too much on, because I think what we've probably, and I think we're all very guilty of this, is that we don't have the power to say no immediately. Because when you come into an industry, I mean, I was having a chat with my wife about this the other day, actually. And when you're going from a full-time job, being paid what you're being paid, to then doing what you're doing, what you actually really, really enjoy, and being paid a hell of a lot more, is kind of like, it was extremely hard to say no to a lot of things.
Hard to know where to draw the line, isn't it? Then, yeah.
Because essentially it's the dream, isn't it? It's what you've spent all that time in that full-time job working towards, earning more money to do something that you really, really love. Yep. So it seems really counterintuitive to actively then turn down work, because you need balance, I suppose. Yeah.
Because I've touched on this on another podcast, that when I first wanted to go full time with this, I did say to my wife, I promised her, I said, this is gonna give me the freedoms, this is gonna give me the time to be around more, and at that point we had our first child in the world, and it'll be I'll be around a lot more for kids and stuff like that, but it couldn't be further from the truth, if I'm honest. I guess that's kind of one of the I wouldn't like to say the darker sides of the industry, but it is, because I think a lot of it comes down to having a lot of self-discipline in this game. It's having the power to say no, because what you can very, very quickly do is become very, very overwhelmed. I did want to touch on a couple of videographers that I know personally that have fallen down this trap of taking on way too much, got way too overwhelmed, and now at the point where they're not turning up for weddings and they're getting a real bad name for themselves. And you could be a real victim of your own success very, very quickly. And it will take a mental toll. Yeah. So I think when somebody said to me at the beginning of this journey, just take on enough, don't go crazy with it. Like, if anybody's listening to this now, then take that advice very seriously.
I think that's really good advice for someone to give you at the beginning. I wasn't told that. I definitely read all the memes that, you know, I'm giving up the 9 to 5 to work 24/7, and it was always kind of glamorized that, you know, you hold your own destiny, but you are selling yourself to the devil a little bit.
It's a brilliant industry to work in, and unfortunately, I think you're right. This subject doesn't get talked about a lot, and there are, as well as all the positives to what we do, and you know, we effectively we have a great job what we do. Yeah. You know, look, I mean, we're doing this in the middle of the day when really I should be
everyone else is working.
in any other career. I'll be behind a desk lining someone else's pockets, right? You know, but here, you know, we get to do this and get to be at home
in the middle of the day and not worrying about being at our office.
And we get to call it work.
Yeah, we call it work. Yeah, exactly.
And we call it work. But that comes, again, with a lot of discipline. Now, if you lose control of that discipline, what you'll end up doing is be like me. And that is being a dad, being a wife, not being a wife. What am I saying? Being a husband. That is non-existent, and being a father that is hardly around. But because I'm stuck in front of the screen all the time.
Yeah. I think that, like you, I've seen a couple of videographers. I don't know anyone personally, but I've seen a couple of situations where videographers have fallen into that hole. And there's, you know, I follow this Facebook page called Wedding Scammers Group, and you can sort of see the same names popping up. And then you go onto their, you know, profile, and there'll be something about taking on too much work, and like it'll be there, but I don't know when, because I'm having anxiety and things like that, and it's taking me much longer to do things. And some weddings I just won't turn up. They just won't turn up to because I guess they're feeling particularly overwhelmed at that point. And I filmed a wedding in April, May, where the videographer just didn't turn up. I think what had happened in previous weddings with this videographer is that they had just, like, at one point they'd got to apparently the photographer worked with them quite a lot. The videographer had turned up, was filming part of the wedding, and then during the couple shoot it was just like, I need to go. I'm having a bit of a hard time. So literally was like, so asked the photographer to film some clips during the couple shoot and just went back to the car. And obviously, like, to get to that point, like, that person obviously needs something to some sort of help to dig themselves out of a hole, and it is a hole that you can get into, and it's much harder to get out than to spot the signs beforehand and stop yourself from even climbing in.
And I guess as well, when it's the hole that you've dug for yourself, it's you know, you essentially have only got yourself to blame. Which, when you're feeling that kind of low or overwhelmed, the last thing that you need as well is to know that you've done this to yourself.
That self, like, oh, it's self-inflicted because I took too many weddings on. Like,
and then
you
don't spiral even more, don't you?
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
So that is sort of like. Yeah, that's the darker end of the industry, isn't it? That if is not having the power to say no, and you end up in a situation like that, and then of course that affects your ability just to do anything in life. And when it affects everything outside of working life, then that's a real problem.
Yeah.
But you know, so I guess that's kind of like with any business, you make mistakes. And you learn by them, and you do better. That's the general, you know, Elon Musk and people like that, they've all fucked up somewhere along the line,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
they've changed things and they made things better.
I mean, Twitter's one of those, right? Talking about Elon.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, we're all human in the end of the day, but I think a lot of it comes down to I think communication is also a big part with your couples, because if you are feeling like you have, if you are a videographer or photographer right now that has taken on way too much, and you know you have, but then don't communicate to your couple, because then what the couples, they don't see the sort of like the back end of everything that's going on with you. Yeah. All they care about is the excitement of getting their photos or videos back and wanting to watch back their big day. They don't really care too much, because at the end of the day, you know, bride and groom, as much as they're nice and you build a relationship, they pay you money for a service that you are going to provide. And if you're not delivering that service, then of course, you know, that leaves a bitter taste in their mouth.
There's various branches to it, though, isn't there? Is that this is an industry where you have to turn up on the day, and no matter how you feel, you have to be on it. You have to smile, and you have to do the exact same job as you did last week when you felt 100%. Yeah. And well, I guess being self-employed in general, a lot of what we're talking about applies to being self-employed in general, but just that having to turn up on a specific day, do something to 100% of your ability, no matter how you're feeling, is one of the branches of sort of, can I do this? And then also, once you get back, we have all of the noise of, you know, oh, you have to update your Instagram like once a week. Then you have to do 4 stories a day. Then you have to do your website, your SEO, your marketing. Like you're so behind on everything. Why your price is not higher, and the noise of everything else is going on as well. Yeah.
But I think as well, it's like you said, it's that knife edge, isn't it? Of you know, when we talked about COVID, looking at a year ahead. There's not many self-employed businesses where they can have a calendar as full of ours so far in advance. So to kind of have that benefit of being self-employed, but also the security of work so far in the future is brilliant. But at the same time, when you've got someone inquiring, you know, for 2026 now, I can't tell you how I'm going to be feeling on your day in 2 years' time. That if you wake up that morning and you are deadly ill, or you've had a really bad family situation happen days or hours before you go to that wedding, you've still got to turn up, haven't you? In kind of feeling, you know, to deliver a service in the way that you were, like you say, on your best day, feeling 100% with no issues going on in your own life. Yeah.
I think, when you are filming weddings, it is a very, very kind of different industry in the respect that you can't just phone in sick or not be your 100%. You have to be 100%. Yeah. There's no two ways about it. But yeah, it's, I mean, I'm not going to lie, you know, post-COVID, it's taken its toll, I mean, on me personally as well. You know, my wife and I nearly split because of it. Okay. Which was, you know, a huge kind of realization.
Because of COVID, or because of like the busyness post?
Just the business of work. Yeah. If I'm being perfectly honest, life just can. All of that, what I was doing was just consuming my time on pleasing others when I wasn't actually personally looking after myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Your wife's a wedding photographer as well, though, right?
Say again, sorry?
Your wife is a wedding photographer, am I right?
She is, yeah. So she got roped into doing. She got roped into this industry as well, bless her. Yeah. But no, I mean, she used to be. Well, she still is actually. She's my second videographer, okay. And it's always nice when we do, you know, things together. But yeah, for a good couple of years now, she's been a wedding photographer and doing a sterling job. And it's always nice when we do weddings together, because we do joke about it. We do call it a bit of a day date because obviously having kids, you know, we don't get a lot of time by ourselves. Yeah. So to be able to obviously, you know, drop the kids off at nannies and then for us to go and stay overnight somewhere, if it's yeah, and then just enjoy shooting the wedding and
together. Yeah, this leads on quite well actually. Like I think I've sort of briefly mentioned it on the pod, but COVID sort of saved my business in a way, ironically, because in 2019, not to get too dark about it, but in 2019 I did 54 weddings, I think, and I was building it up, like building this business and thinking, oh, it's going really well, and I was, oh yeah, I've got 50 weddings, amazing, kept taking them, never really set a limit for myself, and I was doing a lot of corporate work on top of those 54 weddings. By the second half of the year, I started getting like really bad anxiety, and I'd have, you know, panic attacks at night. Just thinking about the edits and everything that I've got going on, I was behind on so much. Weirdly, like I was more up to date than you'd imagine for that amount of weddings. But the worst bit was turning up to weddings, and there's some specific times I remember where I couldn't get out of the car. I'd turn up to a wedding and I'd just be sat in the car. And I can't do this. I can't get out. And I'll be like, yeah, I'm starting at 10 o'clock, 3 hours before your ceremony. I'll be there in the car at 10:15. Like, I've already got to get out now and do this, but something's stopping me, and I can't. Like, this mental like wall is basically in front of the car, and I can't leave it. And that came from, you know, overworking, lack of mindfulness. I probably wasn't doing much in my personal life at that point because I had so much going on. So everything revolved around that one sort of like source of income and doing that job. And in a way, that pattern might have continued in 2020 had COVID not happened and all the weddings got sort of postponed and moved back. And I remember sort of like we didn't know each other as well then,
no.
But in like end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I remember saying to you, I'm done. Like that.
Yeah, I remember saying to you, that you were going to, me being kind of really sad that, you know, we'd worked a few weddings before that, and kind of thinking that you were going to leave the industry.
Nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
But then when COVID hit, I realised that it wasn't the job that I hated in a way. Like, it wasn't the filming and editing weddings that I hated. It was the way that I was approaching it and in the numbers game and things like that. And it taught me to be a bit more mindful about what was important, because obviously at COVID everything was stripped down to just what was important, and also to start limiting things a lot more. And we rebranded and my wife got involved and we started spending more time together because we were doing the business together rather than just me on my own. And things have changed dramatically since then. I genuinely don't think I'd be far away from the wedding videography right now if it wasn't for COVID.
I think from the conversations that we had back then, and obviously I can't speak on your behalf, it was 1, the volume.
Yeah.
I think 2, the fact that you got into filming weddings because videography was your hobby.
Yeah.
And then you'd got to a point where your hobby had grown to this hugely successful but monster, that there was nothing left in your personal life because what you used to do for fun had then become your job.
Yeah.
And then I think also the third point to that as well is, like you said, the volume of work came from taking on anybody. Like, your ideal client was 2 people getting married, and that was it.
I never vetted clients.
And I think going through COVID, you probably dealt with people on a much more human level, or your clients at a much more emotional level than we'd maybe seen them before. And the people that maybe were your people who were sympathetic towards your situation as well as theirs really shone through, and it became more obvious than ever that you had to kind of lean towards those people more than just having a much more general client.
Yeah, it was definitely a case of, I mean, when you don't vet your clients, you like you say, if they inquire and you just start booking them in, there definitely in 2019 was a lot more people that I'm like, I don't gel with these people on the day, and I think that it probably had more of an effect than I thought as well. Whereas now, like this year, like it's completely the opposite, where everyone I'm working with has, you know, I've spoken to them on the call, I know exactly what they're like, and most of them are 100% on my vibe, and you just know that turning up to it, so you never get that turning up to a wedding and being like, I know that this couple, you know, didn't want a phone call with me or something before the day, so they're not really that bothered about me, and I'm feeling like really nervous about it or whatever. So the processes that you can put in place to change those kind of attitudes make a big difference as well.
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of what you just said just then about how impactful, you know, taking on too much work has had on you personally, draining away any kind of personal time. And I mean, I used to be very, very confident. I mean, I used to work in radio and do a lot of that kind of stuff. But now just kind of, it's having too much work. I never really got out. I became very isolated, didn't see any friends, didn't network as much as I wanted to. I mean, if I'm being really honest, even winning TWIA, right, gave me a sense of anxiety afterwards, because it's like, oh right, so I'm the national winner now. Like, how do I see this? Like, I want to make sure I want to put out my best work just to be worthy of this award, because it is a massive accolade. You know, it's one of those that, you know, that most videographers want to win, and I was very humbled to have received that award. And then afterwards, I just kind of felt like, I don't know, it's
imposter syndrome, isn't it? It's like you've got
there's a lot more eyes on you now.
And but like I said, it's, you know, I was working literally every hour. I mean, we went to Florida as a family holiday, and we, as I said, we post-COVID, that was for 2 years, we never went on holiday, so we went a little bit more kind of extravagant with the flight on the way out and stuff like that. But by that point, obviously, weddings were still were happening again. I was building up a massive backlog, to the point I had to take my editing with me, and that's quite sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you have to go, and you know, especially when you go to Florida, and you're taking your hard drives and your laptop with you, you're editing on the plane, your kids just sat next to you, and your wife as well. And it's like, Daddy, what are you doing? Why are you working? Why are you not on holiday? And you know, you look back at it now, and I just think, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Why did I do that?
But I think the fact that you can recognise that because you're not in that place anymore is far more healthy than you still going, this is my life, I have to do this because I'm self-employed, and you almost make excuses for it. To look back and say, you know, I've done these things, and you almost use that as a reminder to not do that again, I think is, you know.
I think what you said about confidence as well is quite important. Like, I find the same as you. Like, the more anxious you get and the more busy you get, the less confident you get in being yourself as a person, because that version of you, which is, you know, you are on the radio, and you've got like your family, and you know, you've got your own life outside of the industry. But the more you get into it, the less you are of yourself. And so you turn up to a wedding, and all you are is the videographer. You're not Mike, the guy who's got, you know, the family man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That confidence in yourself as well, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, for at least a good few years now, it's just not having that ability to switch off from the business, you know. I always promise myself when I go on holidays now, I don't look at my phone. I don't go on my emails and stuff like that. So that's always a top tip. But and I say that because, you know, there were times where I'll go on holiday and I'll get an email, and it causes so much anxiety. Like, I had one particular bride, and this was during COVID times, obviously when we was all very busy. Now, we obviously explained to all the brides that we rebooked and this and that and the other, said, look, this year's not going to be a normal year. You're going to be waiting for your films a hell of a lot longer. This particular bride obviously didn't get the memo, and caused quite a lot of stress, shall I say. And this was all happening, I mean, I was stupid enough to even look at my emails on a holiday. And again, this is another point where I look back and think, Mike, what were you doing? I was sat in a restaurant looking at this email and replying to it with all my family there, just looking at me going, what are you doing? And yeah, it's quite a sad story, but it's kind of nice now to look back at it and go, do you know what, I'm past that point.
Yeah, you set your boundaries, and I think like we will get into ways to avoid what we're talking about, because I think it's important to go into like our experiences of it, but more important to catch it early and figure it. Like we've been there, we've been through it, and almost come out the other side. There's always going to be times where we go, like, we sort of edge back in. There are times where I get so busy again that I'm like, oh Jesus, I'm starting to feel it now. But having that experience of already done it, us by talking about it on this pod can only mean that someone who's listening to this in their first year, who's maybe booking quite a lot for next year, hopefully won't make the same mistakes as we do. And I think the key is...
And one of the key points as well is to look after yourself as well. Yeah. Not just mentally, but physically as well. It's getting out and taking that walk and doing that exercise. It's
mindfulness. I've put mindfulness because I mean, I don't mean it in a case of you got to meditate or, you know, that kind of thing. I mean it in a case of our brains are always just full of so much information going in. Sometimes, like you say, you need to take a walk or you need to get yourself out of it and have time to think about nothing. Because not even the TV or like going and watch the TV, that doesn't really relax you in the way that most people think it does. Just having fresh air hit your face and having like the senses aren't overloaded with, you know, you've got your headphones on, you're watching the screen, you're listening to things. Having mindfulness generally really helps with things like burnout and anxiety, and then once you get back to it, working after that, you generally feel better.
Yeah, and it's different for everybody, isn't it? It's not as if there is a kind of, you know, like one trick solution for everybody. Some people don't like to take a walk, where some people love to go and ride their bike, or, you know, like personally, like I bought myself an ice bath, and some people think that sitting in cold water is for absolute idiots. But it's the one thing that as soon as I hit that cold water, it frees my mind of anything and everything, and I can come out of it genuinely feeling.
Because all you're thinking about is, shit, I'm cold.
It's literally it. That's all I'm thinking about in that moment is survival, really. Yeah. But I found that I need to maybe take it to that extreme, because my mind will kind of flood with things. That's the place that I kind of feel most free, and so that's kind of my method. Or I know when we spoke to Damien from TWIA, like, he talks about having kind of his pillars that pull him away from his desk. So that's, you know, going to the gym in the morning and walking his dog in the evening they're two non-negotiables, because, you know, and then everything else in the middle is kind of work. But it's something which is strong enough to pull you out of that, I'm so busy, I can't afford to do this. I don't need to go to the gym, I can stay at my desk a bit longer, isn't it?
Yeah, having
I mean, the good news of all of this, because, I mean, we've all had to start with somewhere when we started venturing into this industry. We always wanted to take on as much as we possibly can to build a profile and all of that. And then if you've never ran a business before, then is having to deal with all of that side of things on top of the editing, the shooting on the day. And it is literally, you've left your full-time job to then be an employee of your own business rather than the other way around. You know, we all want the end goal to be the business to work for you. And that is, and I mean that in a way that you are going out to shoot your 25 to 30 weddings a year. You edit efficiently, you've got all your processes in place. You systemize your business to a point where everything just kind of is so efficient that, you know what, everything just kind of flows. And you are then reaching your niche. You are charging what you're charging. You're happy with where you are, and that's kind of all that we aim for. But like you alluded to a minute ago, yeah, I think when we talk about this is going to be very, very good for people who are now venturing into this industry, who are new, and heed this advice and take this on board very, very seriously, because you know, especially if you've got family and if you've got a wife, girlfriend, whatever, you know, they will still want to see you, and what you don't want to end up doing is burning out and be working all the time, because that's it.
Yeah, we're there on. Yeah, we're capturing the happiest days of our clients' lives, and it's really easy to get caught up in kind of, we're hearing these speeches and kind of outpourings of love on a weekly basis, and it's almost not desensitizing yourself to that and realizing that, say, we've all got partners and wives and children at home who, you know, need to hear this stuff from us as well, or even just, you know, us be in their lives and have that life for ourselves. Like, we all said those things on our wedding days, or you write it in a card on your anniversary, but it's backing it up, isn't it? And it's really easy to kind of see these days, but realizing that you do have that and you need that for yourself as well.
Yeah, and what I will say is as well is that if you are in this situation now where you can relate to this, for anybody listening, that is, that you are feeling burnt out, you've got a lot to do and there's more coming, then don't be afraid to ask for help. And I don't mean go and see a counsellor or anything like that. But what I mean is get external help to help with your business, to help with editing, with culling or whatever. You know, don't think it always has to be you that has to do it.
I did want to shout out, just because I know Tom won't as well, having a community and friends around you is obviously really, really important. And Tom runs something in Hampshire in the south, I guess, called the Wedding Coactive, which is monthly meetings just at a coffee shop between wedding suppliers, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Welcome to anybody,
and an opportunity just to turn up, just to have a chat, talk things through. And I know that I've made, met some people that maybe I've met before, but then really got to know, or just made really good friends from there. Now that I know that if, there is a situation that I get into where I feel like I need some help, those people will be there for me. And I wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for the wedding, like the Coactive. So I feel like something like that and finding bits like that is really important.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things, and one of the things that came out, I think it might have been you that said it at one of our very first meetings, is that for all the things that we've just spoken about, is that if you chat to your friends about who, if they're not self-employed or particularly don't even work in this industry, is on the surface it can seem that we have a really cushy life, that we only work on a Saturday and charge lots of money for one day's work, and and this and that, where you're moaning about, these speeches got moved to then, or this backed up, or I've got this much to do. It's quite easy sometimes for your friends to look at on quite a surface level and be like, oh, first world problems, woe is you. But to have a space with people who do understand or are going through a similar thing as you, like, I know it's a really old saying, but that kind of problem shared, problem halved kind of thing, it only works when you're in good company that truly understand what you're going through. And I think that's probably one of the best things, or one of the proudest moments of me and Katie forming the Coactive, for sure.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing what you've done, and I'd like to be part of that group at some point.
Definitely come down for it. Yeah,
that'd be good. I didn't know it exists, to be honest. And like I said, I mean, I'm kind of talking from experience where I have dealt with a lot of my personal issues by myself, and never really had that known to me, if that makes sense, or anything similar known to me. So I think that's very important, is to establish a community, and don't lock yourself away. And like I say, don't, if you are in a bit of a spiral with your editing backlog or anything like that, then it is okay to get editors to help you with certain things. At the end of the day, you still have the final you still have the final say on the end product, if that makes sense. It's just, you're just getting a little bit of help with things just to move things along, even though you are spending a bit of money, but I would rather have the happiness.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Money is worth having the time and the extra time with family and friends, and
also I think it's easy to remember, like, that we are one-man businesses, and you said it yourself earlier, Mike, that it's not just that shooting and editing, it's the admin, it's the taxes, it's the social media, where if you look at any business, they have departments just for marketing, they have departments just for social media, where you're just taking one hat off and slapping another one on, and trying to do all of those things in still the same amount of hours that you would do one task if you were working for somebody else. So when you look at it in kind of that thing, it's that being kind to yourself is that you are a one-man business or one-person business, and to ask for help in areas that you're probably not an expert in. Like, I know I certainly knew nothing about accounts when I signed up to do this job, and have had to learn on the job, or so to seek help in my numbers or to seek help in my SEO. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's, if anything, it's good business sense, isn't it?
I think the first step really is to see the signs early. Because you will know if you know you've been through it before, but even if you've not, there are signs that, like, you are getting into this zone of, okay, it's a little bit sketchy now. I know that when the last podcast day that we did, I turned up and Tom was like, how are you? It's like, yeah, it's considering it's June. I'm not really stressed. I feel a little bit exhausted, but I'm not stressed. And then, like, the day after, I went to the gym, and on the screen in front of me, there was just a video of this woman just with a bowl of crisps in front of her, just literally just shoveling it into her mouth. And it said, "Are you this is a sign that you if you're overeating, then you might be stressed." And, like, I got home and I just see, like, the tube of Pringles and the chocolate all over my desk, and was like, yeah, I'm definitely like stress eating at this point. And in my head, I didn't realize I was as stressed as I was, but I knew that I was actually going to the shop and eating just because that's my way of dealing with, like, being a little bit out of control or a bit exhausted by things. And so everyone's sign is going to be different, but there are signs that you notice, oh, why did I just, like, flip at that or get offended by that when normally I wouldn't? And little things like that maybe should trigger something in your mind that, okay, things, need to slow down or change a little bit.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's crazy. You know, I mean, my journey has been a bit of a crazy ride. Finally, things are kind of a little bit more settled now, but
Yeah.
it's but you know, it's nice to be able to talk about this and be kind of very kind of open about it, because it is very important. It doesn't get talked about much, you know, and like you've alluded to already, we are one-man bands essentially, that do all the functions and roles of our business. But it is, like I say, yeah, it's okay to get help.
So Mike, do you now like have, obviously you're saying with like spending more time with your wife and kids and things, do you have any boundaries that you put in place now, that you try and stick to? Obviously it's hard to stick to them, especially during the summer. But do you have any boundaries that you put in place? Like you only edit during certain times, or, you know, you have specific times that you spend with family, or?
Yeah, so I definitely put a cap on how many weddings I take every year. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that I've done is increase my prices, just purely because I want
take less weddings, can't you, basically?
I want. What's the saying? I want to work more
Smarter.
I want to work smarter, but obviously I want
charge
to
more
work,
to shoot less, definitely.
yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. But it's not just purely for that. It is more so that I can then give the real attention to creating something really good, and not only that, it's it really does then home in on that real fine niche that really appreciate all your work. Because I'm not sure I'm sure we've all had this, where we deliver some work, it'd be the best work you've ever done in a long time, and you don't even get like a thank you email back or anything, where you have some couples that are out there that absolutely gush over your work and stuff like that, and go, thank you so much, this is the best thing you've ever seen. I mean, we don't expect it, don't get me wrong, you know, we don't expect it, but you just definitely know the ones that that really appreciate the value of the level of work that we do, to the ones that don't. So yeah,
and also I think as creatives, I can only talk for myself, but I'm a needy person. Like I don't expect to be gushed over or, you know, lavished with gifts. But for someone to just send me an email to go, "We love this, thank you," or recognise the work that you've put into something, that's enough for me. Just a solid thank you or a hug at the end of a wedding and go, "You've really done well for us today." That means just as much as someone buying you a bottle or whatever. Like I don't need you to roll a red carpet out for me, or I don't expect to be a diva. But I recognise in myself that I am a needy person, and you know, just say for someone to turn around and just give me that kind of praise and go, "Thank you." That's I think that's not. I don't think that makes you a bad person to want that.
No, not at all. I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. You know, so that is one of the boundaries I put in place. It was not a boundary. It was a business decision to kind of up the amount that I'm charging to basically do less, but obviously be more attentive to those couples that do book me, to give them basically everything that I've got, every ounce of energy that I can afford throughout that wedding season, without then encroaching on my personal life, my family time, and my own personal satisfaction and enjoyment in life. The second thing is my editing time. Now, I have been a little guilty recently, but so I used to be staying up till about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and then getting up at 7 the next day to do school run with the kids, and that used to be on repeat. Now, I don't recommend to anybody to do that because it's not healthy. It really isn't healthy, and I have been struggling with that for a long time. But I've scaled it back a lot now. I'm going to bed more than like 11 o'clock, but I'm also kind of then cutting away from the screen a lot earlier, so then I can have that kind of time before bed that I can just zen out. I can close my eyes, put some meditation music on, and then just go off to sleep. So I really struggle with that. So that is one of the other boundaries that I put in place. But what else?
I think, like, for me, I don't edit outside of work hours, really. I don't give myself boundaries necessarily on emails and things like that, because if I'm free and I've got a little bit of time, I might reply to an email or an inquiry. But in terms of like actual getting down and focusing on something, it's usually within 9 to 5 on a Monday to Friday. So that outside of that, I'm either spending time with my wife or actually saying that as well. So we'll have, you know, like consultation calls and like pre-wedding calls. We now limit them to Monday night and Wednesday night, and we have 2 slots that people can book for each of those nights. So that, because there was a point a year or 2 ago where we were literally having calls every single night, and it's like, when do you stop? And I'm editing 9 to 5, then I'm getting on a call with a couple till 8 o'clock, and it's like, when do you stop? So setting that editing boundary and then setting those call boundaries has set up that I know that I'm going to be free on a Tuesday evening, a Thursday evening and a Friday evening. And other than weddings, I know I'm going to be free on a weekend, because I'm not going to sit down and edit on a weekend, because I've just set that boundary that's not happening.
See, I found even moving my initial client meetings from in-person meetings to Zoom meetings, which kind of happened through COVID, that I really wouldn't go back now. Before, so I'm going, oh, can you come to our house? And it might be a 30-minute drive to the house. And then you naturally sit there longer. It might be an hour and a half that you're there, half an hour drive home. And then you can't find somewhere to park, so that's another 20 minutes, where now I know that I can book in, say, a 30 or 40-minute Zoom call. When I'm done with it, I shut the laptop and I'm downstairs and I'm back at family time. Yeah. And that's something now that I would really struggle to negotiate on. Just even that, having that little bit of time back in the evening is absolutely golden.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So now that you mention it, actually, that is something that I put in a long time ago, because like you said, during COVID times, when all the postponements were, the rebookings were happening, with the, you know, when was COVID? 2020, wasn't it? Yeah. February 2020, we got shut down. March 2020 rather. So, you know, 2021, 2022, it was just relentless. It was constant Zoom calls. And yeah, like I said, one of the boundaries I did put in place was, right, Monday night, similar to you actually, you know, Chris, Mondays and Wednesdays, that's the only time I do the evening calls, and that is it.
And it frees up the rest of your evenings then, doesn't it? So that
even now, actually, I don't make it kind of mandatory so obviously we got the kind of initial consultation with like new business. So I'll be like, okay, well, I'll do that at my earliest opportunity. But any kind of pre-wed calls is very kind of more structured. And I even say now to couples, I said, look, as once you finish the questionnaire, we can just have a quick phone call, 2 minutes. I don't think we need to go through the whole Zoom process again. You know what you're getting. You filled in the questionnaire. I've got all the answers to the questions. If you want to, I'll give them the choice now rather than saying you have to, because it's nice to reconnect, but we can do that over a phone call.
Yeah, true. I still like doing the video calls, but I do understand what you mean, and it like saves them the stress, because sometimes you do, you know, it's 4 weeks before their wedding. Sometimes you do get on the call and they're just like looking tired, and they're just like looking at their watch and wondering when this is going to be over.
Yeah, or you're the 5th Zoom call they've had about their wedding that week, and they're not talking about it.
Talking about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I've kind of got that from, really, because, you know, a lot of times, you know, I'll get replies to say, look, we really want to book in for a Zoom, but we can't really find the time to do it because we've got hens, we've got stag do's, we've got this and that and the other sort out, and you know what it's like. It all gets a little bit stressful, you know, with the lead up to the wedding. So yeah, that's why I give them the option now. It's like, you don't have to.
But no, that makes sense. Exactly. I feel that with the slots that we do, I know what you're saying, like with the consultation calls, you might be a bit more flexible. But it's interesting to see, like, when you email, like, reply to an inquiry and say, oh, do you want to book in a call? And sometimes during the summer, all my slots are booked up with pre-wedding calls. And sometimes they'll get back and be like, oh yeah, just booked a call with you in a month's time. And I'm like that's actually kind of a positive thing for me. It puts it in my head that, like, okay, they want me because they know that my first slot is in a month's time and they've booked it.
And they're willing to wait.
Yeah. Whereas if you hadn't replied to that inquiry in a month, they're definitely not getting back to you. But they're happy to wait to have a chat with you. So I think it kind of puts that in your head that, like, okay, that person's busy. And for me, it's like, okay, that person is happy to wait for me, which means the probably more likely to book after the call.
I think that's it. And sometimes a lot of the problems that we have in our head are purely self-fabricated, particularly with emails. Like, sometimes like an email will come in an evening and you'll be like, I've got to reply to that. And it's like, well, you don't, because because you can wait, or, I found, and someone kind of clued me up to kind of the art of schedule sending, like pretty early on in my business. And I found that like a real help. Like if I came home from a wedding on a Saturday night and I had an inquiry during the day, if I replied to that email at 11 o'clock at night while I'm backing up, I'm sat there watching the images upload anyway. It's easy to reply. But if that couple then get a reply from you at 11:15 on a Saturday night,
you look kind of organised.
In that journey, you're giving them kind of that green light to email you at all hours of the day, because they go, well, he'll be up.
Yeah.
So if I just schedule sent that, then it went out at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning.
You can't do that with Student Ninja, can you?
And I do it through my Gmail. I can, but unfortunately with Student Ninja you can't yet. So with the kind of the initial inquiry you can't. But all my future emails after that, I'll always, if I am at my desk late or early, I will always schedule send, so it only goes out within office hours, so that when you tell people I'm at my desk these times, they're very much of the impression that if they do email later than that, it won't get picked up to the next day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually.
This is another thing with obviously with doing what we do is time management, and not be too distracted from things. Like for instance, there are tools out there now that, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you probably get asked this all the time around this time of year. What are your dietary requirements? We always get this from couples. I have an autoresponder on it always at this time of year. And there's 3 things I put on that autoresponder. If you're chasing me for wedding videos, check out my editing queue on my website. Here's the link. We sent it to you. If you are wanting my PLI insurance documents, here's the link to that. Yeah. If you want to know about my dietary requirements, I don't have none. As long as it's not a veggie meal, I'm quite content with that. But they have all the answers there and then. And then it's the case of quickly going back to them. Did you get everything you need? And that's basically it. It's just, or there's probably, I haven't found this yet, so don't quote me on it, but there must be an AI tool of some sort that Google Mail or similar platforms use to go, if there are certain questions in their email, can you auto respond like this? And I'm sure there are things out there, but even those kind of emails, take, when they're asking for documents and stuff like that, you can just have it all kind of ready. Yeah,
I have a Dropbox folder on my computer which lives in my Dropbox, and it more or less is sort of client pack and then that year. And so as I get a new public liability, that gets dropped in there. There's a text document in there which has all of my handles, for Instagram, website, email and stuff. So if venues go, we're looking for your supplier's information, they can just send them a link to that folder. I haven't got clever enough like that yet that I can I still have to manually type the email and then just add the link in. But to have that somewhere in my footer, where you go, if you're looking for anything, say dietary requirements, public liability, PAT testing, it lives in this folder. And that's what I find, trying to keep reattaching the files. I can't do that on the go, where if I just have this Dropbox link and go, it's here,
just copy and paste the link.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I'm going to speak to obviously now to photographers and videographers who use Studio Ninja as their CRM.
Both of us do.
Yeah,
so
we'll use it.
We'll happily help your questions. We actually have an episode on it if you want to listen to that.
So they got. So I understand they're in beta testing at the minute, the kind of updating the client portal where you can upload those documents. So you should, your clients will have basically everything that they need from you. So they might, these emails hopefully will just, with all these questions, will disappear.
Yeah, so in your portal, you have, when you go into the workflow on Studio Ninja, there's kind of like the workflow notes and mail. There's a file section, which they can upload their kind of wedding timeline, which I do that now. So I have a link on my final questionnaire that says, do you have a schedule for the day? You can upload it to the questionnaire. Cool. It then adds it into the files folder automatically. And I believe, and again, I haven't tried it yet, but I believe that is a two-way street. If you wanted to, is you can upload things to the files and they can then see it through their portal as well, I believe.
That's pretty cool.
Again, I've not done it, so don't quote me on it. But I believe that you can do it both ways.
Just a quick one, and about to finish it off about destination weddings, because I mean I've got my first proper one in a few weeks' time, so I bet in about a month, where I'm not a guest at it. and I'm like anxious about it. And when I say anxious in this context, I mean it's a good kind of anxiety. Like, you know, when you're like, I'm looking forward to this, but it's obviously a bit different. And like I'm going to Lake Como, venue called Villa Cipressi. It looks lush, but because it looks lush, I'm getting that like imposter syndrome. Like, what am I going to be doing there? But yeah, so that little bit of like like something different anxiety, which I think is a good kind to push you out of your comfort zone a little bit. But I know that you've put in your notes about your Malta wedding, and
yeah, I feel like I should delete that out now. That's the like I think I've said through all of this, like you know, you've talked, you know, you've both shared stories kind of around your mental health, and luckily I think I've never really suffered from sort of massive anxiety, but the idea of kind of overwhelm and burnout is something which I could definitely sympathise with. And I think the nearest that I've ever had to having a panic attack work related was when I did my first destination wedding last year in Malta. The travel out there with my kit, kind of, the fear of the unknown, the feel of being good enough for my couple, and the rest of it. And I got there. So I flew out 2 days before the wedding. So I kind of got there on the Wednesday. I had the pre-meal on the Thursday, and then the wedding was on the Friday. Or something in that kind of dynamic anyway. But I remember getting there and laying in the hotel room kind of on the bed once I was there, and just hyperventilating and like catastrophizing in my head, and kind of running through all these like wild scenarios that would never happen about all the things that could go wrong, and kind of work myself into a real kind of panic, I suppose, about it. And luckily, like, my wife had come out with me, and she'd kind of used it to have like a little bit of a pool break while I was there, and that she was there and kind of calmed me down and talked me down, and kind of I managed to get through it. And then once I knew that once I got in front of my couple and started shooting, I would be okay. But kind of having that gap before, I think some of it was the relief that I'd kind of got through customs, but I got my kit there and the rest of it. And then the other half of it was the kind of the absolute fear of the unknown, say shooting in that heat, shooting different lighting conditions, you know, kind of language barrier and all of that stuff. It really kind of worked me up to a point where even now that I look back at that wedding and I loved it, I think I made, you know, some beautiful work, but the anxiety that it brought would definitely make me think twice or again if I was approached for a destination inquiry.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we had our first destination weddings, I mean, we shot in Ibiza last year and Tuscany. They were both fantastic weddings. Now, the bonus of destination weddings is that you should really be flying out a day early before all kicks off. So it'll give you, so you can have a real good look around and get to know the place. 9 times out of 10, I'm not sure, Chris, if your couple are having like a welcome dinner or anything like that.
No.
Well, I was quite lucky with, one of the two, is that we had a bit of a welcome dinner, but for my Ibiza couple that we had an engagement session, sort of like a couple session the day before.
Same, that's what I did. I had a couple session, then we went on to the welcome dinner afterwards, so I kind of had both, and that did really help.
So in that sense, you kind of then just kind of get to know your surroundings. But yeah, my biggest anxiety was getting the gear on the plane and getting through customs with it, because I know, as I understand, you have to have what's called a carnet, and I've been warned about this several times. But
although the discussion about this is very skewed, because like some people say you need it, some people say you don't. I have respect to a photographer recently who said they knew somebody who filled it out and did everything, and then got told by customs that it wasn't actually needed because there wasn't enough gear there for it to be needed. And it's more for like big bands and stuff who have got tons and tons of gear, and not just someone with a few cameras. So it's like even that information is a bit skewed, I think.
I think that was what led to half of my anxiety, is that not knowing. Like, I had like played out that scenario in my head where I was going to get to the airport again, albeit a couple of days before the wedding, and kind of go, well, yeah, why are you traveling with all this stuff when you're telling us that you're essentially going on holiday? Yeah. Like, you know, getting turned away, leaving that couple without a photographer, or you know, you're not planning enough that, you know, your bag goes, oh, it won't fit in the overhead, we're going to have to put it in the hold, and then I'm losing it, and kind of all of that stuff.
It's the amount of batteries you can take on board as well. Which
because I got stopped at security for that reason. So someone said to me, take all of your batteries out of your cameras because they can swell with the pressure. So obviously I had like 6 camera batteries, like flash batteries, AA's, all in like a clear baggie at the airport, just in my bag. And obviously my bag then got filed for extra checks because
Yeah, so many.
Essentially, the guy, when I got there, when I opened my bag and he saw that it was just a baggie full of batteries, he was like, "That reads up on our scanner that you've basically got a car battery in the bottom of your camera bag because all of the power is in a block together."
Block,
yeah.
So yeah, I would recommend if you're traveling more than a couple of batteries is to spread your batteries around the bag like I did. In your laptop bag, your camera bag. I mean, luckily for both destinations, I had Emma, my wife, come with me as a second. So she took out a bag with her anyway, so we kind of split the batteries in between. So that's how we kind of got around it. But yeah, that's the only kind of anxious part of the wedding. But to be honest, I just kind of gone into it and I just saw it as, yeah, destination weddings, that's fine. You know, at the end of the day, it's just another wedding. As long as you're clear on, you know, what you're expecting. You know, destination weddings can go from, you know, they can be so different traditionally, but you know, as long as you know in advance what you're expecting, then it's...
I think as well, I think it's probably worth saying, half the anxiety I think with mine is I shot a wedding the day before I flew, and I knew that I had a wedding the day after I flew home. So I think it was a pit stop in a very, very busy month for me, and so I think I got on the plane probably feeling, again, like we spoke about, that I had 1,000,001 other things that I should have been doing, not, you know, whilst I was flying. When I got there, because technically I was still working, I, you know, was trying to keep up with emails and do all the rest of the things that I was normally trying to do at home. It was just the fact that I was in a different country to shoot a wedding. And I think that probably didn't help at all, that I probably should have blocked it out my diary, and that, you know, my travel would have been kind of an out of office day and the same coming home, or not then worrying that if my EasyJet flight had got panicked, I had to have somebody waiting here as a backup to shoot the wedding that I was having the day after. And
yeah, it was something you were anxious about, but you didn't give yourself the space to think about it and like talk yourself down.
Yes, and the problem arrived as it was happening.
Yeah. So did you just go through without any like carnet or anything, like any?
We did. We had one moment when we arrived into Pisa for our Tuscany wedding, where my wife got stopped by security, but the question was, what flight did you just come from? And I think it was more just to kind of see what was arriving rather than just so, all right, okay, yeah. And then security bloke went off. I was like, oh, okay, all right, cool.
You thought that was it?
Yeah,
like,
you got a heart in your mouth moment. Yeah. You think you're going to get dragged off and get deported and your cameras are going to get lost, and
Yeah, let's just get through these double doors very, very quickly and get out of here.
I like what Russell Kent does, where he's covered his suitcase full of gear in like a touristy like New York cover that makes it look like he's just like a really like happy, bubbly tourist, but inside is like loads of camera equipment, and it just puts people off checking it because it doesn't look like it's someone who's off to work.
It's a very clever way of doing it, because I understand that he got stopped a few times on his travels. So
I think he does everything legit now. But I think, judging by the last thing I listened to, but yeah, I think that's a good place to sort of wrap it up. And I think it's been a very like it's been one of those episodes where I don't think it's negative, because it's one of those things that happens, and like you say, it's not as spoken about because it's not the glamorous luxury weddings raising your prices topics that like are always trending, but at the same time it's probably something that affects most of us. So
yeah, and I think to summarize, that was one of the things that you said that you put in to remedy it, and it's really easy to kind of glamorize raising your prices, that so that you can afford life's finer things. But I think on an actual base level, being able to then take on a manageable amount of work is probably the biggest takeaway from charging more, so that you can live a more kind of, work comes at a more manageable pace for the one-man businesses that most of us are.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it was getting to a point that, especially after COVID, I was just getting way too stagnant with the whole job. It was just getting to a point where I was just like, it was just a constant production line. Yeah. And like I said, by charging more, you are hitting a specific niche, and you want to serve those clients as best you can, and then you can really bring out your inner creativity and bring that soul back into what you're doing, and really enjoy doing it again. But I think that's very important.
definitely. Well, yeah, again, like really appreciate you coming on to talk about it, and it's been nice to probably get to have a chat with you as well. For those listening, I hope it's been helpful if you're either currently going through something like this, or maybe you're starting, you're starting your business, and hopefully this sort of information from people who have been through it and done it will help you sort of avoid the anxiety or the burnout and put things into place to stop that. And obviously let us know if it's been helpful at all for you guys to hear some of this stuff. Yeah,
and don't be afraid to reach out, to us. Happily we'll DM us, and we can help share those problems or our solutions, or find people in your own community. Like, you are definitely not alone in this if you're going through that. And like you've said, Mike, there's just kind of finding people in your kind of area, or just people to help share that load with you if you are feeling that way, that you're not an island in this. And there are ways and means and people that can help you.
And I did want to mention that by the time this episode comes out, our tickets will be available to our workshop. So we'll put a link down below to that in the description, which we are currently planning. Yes. But it's we record these episodes so far in advance that at the moment it's not planned. But by the time this episode goes out, there will be tickets available to the workshop. We'll put a link in the description below. Thanks again, Mike, for joining us. One more question for you. We're about to go and get a meal deal. So do you have a go-to meal deal?
Get a meal deal. Well, do you know what? I live on a new build estate where literally there is a McDonald's right at the end of it. So I think that's where I'm going to be heading next. So
okay, McDonald's.
Taking that to a different level. That's it. We're going for a cold sandwich.
It's so dangerous that McDonald's being there, honestly.
That must be lethal on the way home from a wedding night. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be. Probably half the reason to the weight gain, but yeah, I'm more conscious of it now. Don't worry about that. So, but now that we've been speaking for the last couple of hours, I think I deserve this.
You definitely deserve it.
You definitely do.
Yeah, and before you jump off, Mike, as well, obviously we've done our plug for the workshop and for us, but where can people find you if they want to watch some of those films that you've spoken about, or just follow your work in general?
Yeah, sure. So my website isn't the most up to date at the minute. I've got to do some work on that. So all my best work and latest work can be found via my Instagram. Just find me at Mac Videography. And also I will be starting a mentoring and I'm starting a mentoring and some kind of education side of what I'm going to be doing towards the end of the year. Nice. So yeah, watch this.
I think that's really, really good. I think for for the wisdom that you shared today, and kind of like you said, for the experience you've had and the journeys that you've been on, there's loads of people out there that would really, really would have got a lot. You've got a lot to give and a lot to share. So I think that would be. It's really nice to see that you're putting that in action.
Yeah, no, I'm a great believer in the fact that it's not just all about putting out pretty pictures or pretty videos. There is a lot in the back end as well that people need to know about. And this, what we talked about today, being mental health, being one of those kind of core subjects, it's very important to be to have that kind of strong mindset around all of it to be great, so you don't fall into traps. Definitely. Like how we all, some of us have. So, but gents, thank you so much for having me on today. It's great. It was lovely chatting to you.
Thank you for coming on. Amazing. And to listeners, thanks for listening, and we'll see you
in
in the
next one.